I truly believe that it should be a requirement for every American citizen to work at least 6 months of retail and/or customer service before being allowed to take on any other type of employment. That ideology alone would greatly change the world. For those who have, you may relate to the stories I'm about to tell. And for those who haven't, you're in for a treat. In some people's eyes, working in customer service immediately classifies you as an undesirable. These entitled people believe that you should bow to their every move, kiss the ground that they walk on, and then thank them for it. They couldn't be more in the wrong. A lot of people, especially young adults, work retail because of the variance in hours, entry-level employment, and availability that collaborates well with their school schedule. There are many other reasons why people make the poor choice to get into retail, but that's the primary path. My name is Kyle. One of my first jobs was at a major multi-department retailer. It was split into 4 categories: grocery, home and garden, apparel, and electronics. I was hired on as a home associate. My basic duties consisted of on-the-floor customer service, building displays, seasonal changes to products, etc. Physically, the job wasn't too demanding, but mentally, hell, I don't even know where to begin. I was first scheduled for closing shifts. I worked from 4 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. The store closed at 11 p.m., but of course, we stay for an extra half hour and clean up the messes left behind by our inconsiderate customers. The first few days were easy enough. Tedious, but easy. It wasn't until about a week or 2 after my start date when I had my first bad customer interaction. "Hello?" Her shrill voice sliced through my eardrum like a razor blade. I turned around to find the face of a middle-aged woman with short brown hair glaring at me. Her upper lip was cocked at an angle of pure disgust, which could only be matched by the tone of her voice. "This chair has a scratch in it. I want a discount." The woman points at a chair display that was built specifically for customers to see the finished product before buying the disassembled version in the box sitting behind it. "I'm sorry, that's actually just a display model. The chair is right here in this box." The words slithered through my teeth as I gestured towards the obvious stack of boxes behind her. She scoffed. "What are you, stupid? I said I wanted this one. I don't want to build the chair." I could almost see her teeth sharpen into fangs each time she opened her mouth. I repeated myself. "Ma'am, I'm terribly sorry, but I'm not allowed to—" "Let me speak with your manager," she interrupted, nearly shaking the fluorescent lighting overhead with the sheer power of her cantankerous roar. I sighed and reluctantly reached for my little portable phone they give each associate to carry around. I dialed my manager's number, and he groaned before telling me he was on his way. "What can I help you with?" he said cheerfully, curling his lips upward in a forceful smile. Her attitude lightened almost instantly upon his greeting, but still lingered. "Your employee is refusing to sell me this chair. I can't put it together myself, so I wanted to buy this one. Problem is, there's a little scratch in the leg here." "I'm terribly sorry, ma'am. I can't sell this particular chair for you since we have plenty disassembled in stock. But here's what I can do. You can buy the boxed item, and I'll have Kyle assemble it right here for you. How does that sound?" Her face sunk back into the vile frown. "No, I don't have time for this shit. You just lost a customer, and be sure to know that corporate will be getting a call from me." She peered down at my manager's name tag. Earl. The lady stomped off, leaving a trail of cheap perfume and hostile energy behind her. My manager turned to me and snickered. "Kyle, you can't win them all. In fact, you'll probably lose every single one of them, but, the customer makes our paychecks possible. Don't let these things get to you." I punched my employee ID into the time clock and headed for the exit door. A sudden reminder notified me that I'd left my lunchbox in the break room, so I turned around to go and grab it. The break room is located on the opposite side of the store, and there's no faster way of getting there other than crossing straight through to the other end. The store was nearly empty by this time, other than a few night shift employees sipping coffee and dragging pallets of boxed freight to their desired locations. The once bright fluorescent lighting was dimmed to conserve energy outside of business hours, giving a sort of ominous feel to the interior of the building. It was surprisingly unsettling, although I spent the majority of my evening there. Ahead of me was the furniture house, a plot of carpet over the linoleum floor with shelved walls that hold all the boxed furniture and their displays. Surrounding it was the larger furniture sets. I wanted to get the hell out of there, so instead of circling around it like I usually do, I just cut through the center. A left turn inside, followed by a right, led me to the center aisle where I met a familiar face. It was the displeased woman from earlier. I was frozen, partially from confusion, and also from shock. I couldn't move. My mouth opened, but words didn't come out. Our eyes locked, but hers had this burning flame of hatred flickering behind them. She lunged at me. My legs finally kicked into gear as I barely managed to escape her attempt to dig her large, manicured nails straight into my throat. Boxes of chairs fell from the shelves. She slammed into the wall at full force. Like an agitated bull, she turned around and charged at me again, this time with a bit more accuracy. I did a half turn and she missed direct contact, but managed to graze my cheek. The woman hissed in displeasure as she spun around and repeatedly clawed at my face. I backpedaled away from her, just barely dodging her swipes, and bumped into another shelf. A dining set came crashing down from above and landed directly between us. "What the fuck was that?" a voice echoed from the other side of the wall. I didn't respond. I redirected my attention back towards the woman. But to my surprise, she vanished. Seconds later, a head popped in from around the corner. A night shift employee, whose name I later learned to be Eric, looked at me, and then at the giant mess surrounding me, and then back at me again. His face transitioned from a look of concern to a look of disappointment and anger. "What the fuck, dude?" he muttered, staring me dead in the eyes. "I'm so sorry, I just go home," he interrupted, while turning back around and grabbing the handle to his pallet jack. So, I did just that. The minute I got home, I went straight to the fridge, cracked open a beer, and pounded the whole thing in one drink. I considered just not showing up the next day, but I couldn't afford the time between jobs again. I'd had a few more before passing out on the living room sofa. A few weeks of normality went by. I was just getting over the trauma of the encounter with that psychotic woman around that time. I never mentioned any of it to my supervisors, by the way. At the time, I felt unsure if it would have been the right thing to do. I was worried I'd get in trouble. After a while, I really started to get into the groove of things, and the job became a second nature to me. I learned the basic in and outs of the department, and made a few coworker friends, and even was given a few more hours on the schedule in rewards for my diligence. One night, it was about 30 minutes until closing. Around this time, the customer service associates will start regularly announcing over the PA that the store will be closing and suggests that the customers wrap up their shopping and start heading towards the checkout lanes. Of course, there are the few that feel as if they're above everyone else and continue for another half hour until they feel the need to check out. All of the associates on the floor start putting away returns and other items that strayed from their homes. In the midst of that, we'd find the straggling customers and direct them toward the checkout so we could get out on time that night. I was cleaning up a huge mess left in the toy aisle by some kids whose parents must have mistaken it for a daycare service when I noticed a man passed out in one of the recliners surrounding the furniture island. I walked up to him and let out a cough to try to get his attention. No response. I waited for a minute or two before calling my closing manager and letting him know what was going on. "Sir, excuse me, sir," my other closing manager, Hannah, choked out. You could tell she was a little anxious to be interrupting the man's sleep. The area our store is in is kind of rough, infamous for violent crimes, drugs, you name it. "I'll call security," I announced while walking back towards the toy aisle. I called security, but they didn't pick up. I used the overhead pager to tell them to head towards the furniture island, but they were too late. A blood-curdling scream echoed throughout the store. I jumped in my skin, dropped the handful of Hot Wheels I was placing back on their hooks, and bolted towards the noise. The man had awoken. Hannah was lying on her back with her knees tucked into her chest. Her arms were protecting her face as the homeless man towered over her. He was plunging something towards the poor girl repeatedly. Loud grunts escaped between his heavy grunts of anger. I saw what he was attacking her with. A needle. Hannah screamed in pain and terror as the man hammered the needle downward over and over into her arms, shoulder, and chest. With his free hand, he tried to pry her arms apart to open her face. He must have stabbed her at least 24 times before 2 very large loss prevention associates flanked the man from the side. "I'll fucking kill that cunt!" the man screamed as he thrashed about within the grasp of the 2 men pinning him to the ground. He repeated that sentence over and over until a knee from the 250-pound man swiftly dropped onto his chest. Blood was everywhere. Hannah had managed to scramble away and was cowering in a ball, crying hysterically. I just stood there in shock, paralyzed from what I'd just witnessed. Blood seeped from the holes on Hannah's arms and chest. One associate applied her first aid training the best she could until the paramedics and police arrived. After that day, I never saw Hannah again. But I did hear that she had a full physical recovery. Mentally, on the other hand, even I was scarred. I couldn't imagine how it must have affected her. Poor girl. After witnessing such a horrifying event, most of you would have probably noped right out of that job that very night. I definitely considered it, but for some reason, I didn't. Maybe it was a lack of events going on in my personal life that kept me there. Maybe it was the anxiety of having to find another job. Who knows? But I do have many more stories I'd be willing to share. I'll do my best to update whenever I can. Wow. The responses I got on my last post were great. It's relieving to hear that a lot of you can relate to my experiences, or even have some similar ones of your own. Bottom line, people are crazy. I'm sorry about the long gap between this post and the last. I'm doing my best to try and describe things the best I can. I noticed that some people mentioned that I left my manager alone with the violent homeless man who was passed out. In my defense, I'm not allowed to do anything beyond call somebody. My manager told me to go back to work anyways, and the man didn't appear to be hostile while he was sleeping. We were just trying to get him out of the store. A memory that stands out to me took place after I was working there for about 6 months. Yeah, a lot of shit occurred within this time frame, but nothing that you all probably haven't heard 100 times. There are a lot of people who have nothing better to do with their time than walk around a store and not buy anything. It's common, and most of the time they aren't much of a problem, as long as they aren't pulling everything off the shelves and leaving extra work for me and my coworkers. We don't really mind them. There's your occasional shoplifters, but I still don't mind them too much because that's loss prevention's job to deal with them. My job is to assist paying customers and make sure my sections are properly maintained. By this time, I was working day shift. As I was passing through the stationery department, I noticed a man lingering around the spiral notebooks. At first, I didn't think much of it. After my second or third pass through that section, I started to get a little suspicious. I offered him some customer service, and he didn't even acknowledge me. Each time I'd pass by, he'd be in front of a different group of items. I really wish I got a better description of the man, but he was wearing a long pea coat and a rain hat. The rain hat seemed strange because it was a moderately warm spring day without a cloud in the sky. This alone I found particularly strange. After about 2 hours, the man finally left. I immediately started to scan the aisle to make sure he didn't fuck up the entire arrangement, but to my surprise, it was just as it was. Something told me to open one of the spiral notebooks. Although everything was as it should be, I'm so glad that I did. Inside the book was a razor blade, one of those double-sided ones. It was wedged between coiled spine and the front cover so it would stay attached just enough to get somebody. I was in shock. Inside the book was a message scribbled in pen. Fucking bleed. I dropped the book on the floor and carefully yet swiftly grabbed another. More razor blades. Fucking bleed. The message was written in the same place on every book. This sent me into a panic. I grabbed binders, composition notebooks, planners, everything, and only found more and more razor blades. The same message written in every single one. I tore open a box of crayons to find 3 razor blades stuffed inside of it. Same with markers, colored pencils, pens, and almost everything in the aisle was loaded with those things. I immediately called my managers and told them what I'd seen. Next, I called the cashier manager and told her to have every cashier check anything from stationery before ringing it up. Loss prevention came and shut down the entire aisle. The police were called, and a full-on investigation was made. Everything was pulled from the shelves and written off. They never caught the man, and every time I think about it, I get nauseous and dizzy, knowing that there are people out there who are twisted enough to do something so terrible. At the eastern end of the store's parking lot, there's a fence with an opening that leads to a senior housing facility. You'll see a lot of elderly men and women wandering around the parking lot by the fence, getting their daily walk in. There's one man I see all the time. He's usually riding around in his electric scooter with another man who I can assume is another resident at the complex. They don't bother anyone because that side of the parking lot is always barren. On the southeastern side of the building is where our metal scrap dumpster is. There's a giant padlock and chain that hold it shut, and only a few associates have the key. Whenever we need to toss something too heavy to throw over the 5-foot wall to the dumpster, we'd have to have a manager open the door so we can get it inside. One day, around 10 a.m., an urgent message is broadcasted over the intercom. "Response team to the southeastern building, now!" I was near the door at the time and quickly ran out and around the corner towards the dumpster. I saw 2 of those rascal scooters along the side of it. One was occupied by an old man, accompanied by an employee, and the other was vacant. I immediately knew there was something wrong. "What's going on?" I asked in a panic. The old man just sat there emotionless. He kept making sloshing noises with his mouth, like something a salivating horse would make, but wouldn't respond. Finally, the other employee spoke. "He fell in the dumpster, but I don't have the key." "What? How the hell did he manage to get in?" I shouted. Soon enough, my manager and another associate with a first aid kit came barreling around the corner. It only took them half a second to identify the problem. A blur of keys and the swing of the giant metal door revealed an elderly man sitting on the floor of the dumpster. Protruding from the side of his head was a 6-inch rusty nail. The man had an emotionless expression on his face. Blood trickled down the side of his head, and it poured off of his earlobe and dripped onto the dumpster floor. "Are you okay?" asked the panicked associate as she unzipped the first aid kit. The old man didn't respond. He grabbed the nail, twisted and pulled it from his scalp, and threw it on the ground. Blood began pouring from the open wound in his head, but he didn't flinch. In fact, the man didn't appear to be in any pain at all. He simply grabbed his chair, tossed it into the basket of his scooter, and sped off. The four of us just stood there and stared at the obscenely large pool of blood lying on the floor. The manager turned to look at us, then swung the door shut and locked it. I wish I could explain to you how disturbing this entire scene was for us. It's something we never spoke about beyond that, and we only tried to forget. But every time I have to go to that dumpster, I see the bloodstains on the floor, and it sends a chill up my spine without fail. If you all are still interested in hearing more stories, I'll try and make some time to flesh out a few more.